So this is the front D section that I've started to disassemble. You can see that I removed those side pods and that I've started to drill out the spot welds for the internal bracing. But while I was taking it apart, it occurred to me that it doesn't make any sense to spend a couple of days just to disassemble this old piece, then cut out 90% of the metal and replace it with some batches of new metal, because it's a lot more work than just making a new one. So I went out, I bought a sheet of steel. It's about 34 euros, so it's quite cheap. And by using the dimensions that I can measure from the original one and from the plans on Jerry's website, I've started to make my own front T section. Problem is, I don't have any metal shaping tools, so I'm doing everything with just basic hand tools, and I'll show you what I've done so far. Firstly, I measured everything and I made a panel. Then I made this, some sort of jig to get the angles correct, because I don't have an angle finder. So this is my cheapo solution. So you can see that these are the correct angles. So once I had these angle dimensions, I took my piece of steel and I went to my vise, because that's the only thing that I have to make bends. This is what I've made so far. As you can see, the angles are correct, and I've already done the front edge. Now, because I only have a vise to do all the bends, I can't make this out of one piece. So I'm making the top section and the side sections and the bottom section separately. Then I'll weld everything together. But to make sure that everything looks correct, I've bent this edge and I'll weld along this edge when I graft this into the front section. You can see these little cuts that I've made. This is because this is the width of my vise. So this is the only section that I can bend in one go. So I already started on the other side, and I'll show you how I do this. So this is the vise that I'm using. It isn't mine, it's in my dad's workshop, because mine was too small. So firstly, I've scribed lines on here that indicate the width of the top section. So I'll center this between the two notches, and I'll measure the distance from the vise to the line, because I know what distance I need from the line to get the exact width of the top section. So now I'm pretty happy with the place the vise grips the piece of metal. I have to be very careful when I do this, because if I'm out, this ledge won't be straight anymore. So to do this, I'm going just to take a piece of steel bar that I still have, and I'll use this as a lever to keep this piece straight while I push it over. So as you can see, it's going straight, but it's bubbling up here. But don't mind that, we'll fix that right now. Just take a big hammer and this piece and just hit it flat. So now we're finished, and you can see it's nice and straight. There's a little piece of metal that pops up in the seam, but that's normal. Just file it off, and then we'll weld this gap closed. So now we'll see how it fits, and you notice we can't push it over this chassis because if we would be able to push it over the chassis, it would be too big. It's supposed to just go on the edge like this. Once we'll weld this into the rest of the chassis, we'll weld all the gaps closed and we'll clean it off, and you wouldn't notice that this is not one part. So I finished making the top piece. The problem is now, because of these slots, this is a very flimsy panel and it doesn't have any rigidity. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to clamp this piece to some straight metal bars, and when I know everything's straight, I'll weld in these gaps between the folds, and that will make it very rigid. So you can see it fits quite nicely, and it came out quite okay, especially considering the tools I had to use. This is the lower front part of the T-section of the chassis. I've already cut it out. The top and the bottom edge still need to be folded. There are a couple of holes that need to be drilled in this. One is this one for the coolant tubes. The other one are here for the master cylinders, but I'll do that once everything has been welded together. To drill these holes, I'm going to use a hole saw. So to drill the hole with the hole saw, I'm going to use a much stronger drill, and this is a slow turning one. So now that this hole is drilled, and this is a 6mm hole, and the drill inside of the hole saw is a 6.5mm drill, and this will make sure that the hole will stay centered where I need it to be. Also, I'm going to use a little bit of WD-40 just to lubricate the hole saw, and this will make sure that this stays sharp for a much longer time. So now we'll clean this up and have a look on how it came out. This is very hot, so I'll have to be careful. Now it looks pretty okay. I'll have to clean it off a little bit using a round file. This is the last piece that I made. This is one of two of the side pieces of the front T-section, and as you can see, I scribed out all the lines and I double checked all the measurements, but I need two of these, so I'm just going to position this on top of this sheet of metal, and I'll scribe around the outside edges, and then I'll have all the scribe lines to cut out the second piece. These are the strengthening plates that go on the inside of the chassis section. So that was the last piece that I had to cut. The next thing that I have to do is I'm going to cut a piece out of the original chassis section to weld into our new one. The piece that I'm talking about is this section here. I'll have to do this because I don't have the tools to make such a big flared hole. If this would be just a plain hole, the chassis would flex quite a lot, because there wouldn't be any rigidity in this section. Because it's a flared hole, it's quite sturdy. Now I'm just going to cut around this side, and then I'll cut a hole into our new section that we've made, and I'll weld this in the new section, clean off all of the welds, and you'll never notice that it wasn't in that panel originally. This is the ring that I cut out of the front T-section. And this is the new panel where it needs to go in. And this is the front, the outside, and you can see I've scribed out the circle. So I'm going to drill out this small hole. Then I'll scribe a circle on the reverse side of this. And then I can put it on the backside like this and scribe out the hole that I need to cut to weld this in. This is the flared hole that I cut out of the old T-section, and you can see that I cut a hole in this new panel, and I've went around the edges of the holes because it's very difficult to weld close to an edge. So it's being held in right now with some magnets. To weld this, I'm going to turn it upside down so that these sides will be completely flush, and then I'll weld it from the back side. I've completely welded the flared hole in the center, but what I'm also going to do when I'm welding on this panel is I'm going to weld up these gaps here. I had to make these to bend the bottom lip in separate pieces. So now I'm just going to weld these gaps up, and this will make it much more rigid. I finished welding the flared hole into the new panel, and I've ground off all the excess weld, and it's very smooth. You cannot feel the transition between the two pieces. I've also welded in the gaps on the folded edges. As you can see on the rear of the panel, I haven't ground off these welds on the back side, but it's not necessary because you won't see it, and this will give this a little bit more strength. What I have to do now is do the same thing on the other side of the T-section with the flared hole, and I need to weld up all of the gaps on the folded edges of all the other panels. This is the trusty vise that I've been using to bend all of the pieces of metal to build the front T-section. Now, I told you I was waiting for some tools. They have finally arrived. And this is it. This is a magnetic vise folder. So you put a piece of metal in here, you tighten the vise, and the metal folds up. I'll quickly show you how I'm going to bend the rest of the panels and how this works. So this is an internal striking plate for the front T-section. On this scribe line, this lip needs to be bended upwards 90 degrees. So to do this, we'll line up the scribe line with this metal plate in the folder, like so. Now we'll just tighten the vise until there's a 90-degree bend in there. I think this is about 90 degrees. Now I'll do the last bit. So I removed one of the jaws, one of the blades in this folder, because it's a very small section and you can't do this with the big blade without ruining the side panels. So I've moved all of the blades to the left side. That way I can fold this piece down. As you can see, fold this up, now I'll just have to bend this up and then weld all of the gaps, and then we'll have a side piece for the front T-section. Once you figured out how it all works, it's not that bad. You see, I had to make quite a few cuts in this, and I had to bend it, rebend it, just to get it right. This is the second one that I did. I have to make 2 cuts. I made all of these folds with the folder and the vise, and this one I did by hand because this is too small to fit in the vise, but it works quite nicely, and it's not that bad as I thought. You just have to learn how to use it. So now I'll have to do couple of more panels and then we'll start assembling everything. I've decided to split this video up into two sections. This is the end of the first section where I'll show you how I fabricated all of the panels. I'll finish this section off by showing you a couple of photographs of all the different panels that I fabricated. In the next video I'll show you how I took all of these panels and fabricated them into a complete front T-section. The next video will be up shortly, but in the meantime you can go to my blog where you can read about the entire process of fabricating a T-section. There's a complete article with about 60 photographs that you can take a look at. You can also subscribe to this channel so you won't miss the next video, and I hope you'll watch that as well. So, goodbye.